24th, 2019 Grafton Board of Education meeting to order. Ask please rise.
We used that for the Rotary luncheon that we hosted on Thursday.
And it's
still there. It's still in the cafeteria. That direction. It's over there. I promise. I promise it is.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry.
All right. We're at that part of the agenda, the public comment section. Are there people from the public here tonight that wish to share their comments with the board? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. We have two items on the consent agenda item. We've got the approval of the minutes from May 29, 2019 board meeting, the statement of receipts and expenditures from May 2019. We have a motion to approve those consent agenda items.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just one thing on the minutes for Lucas Coppersmith, I believe it's first grade, not kindergarten. It says, oh, no, first grade. Sorry, no, it's fine.
Okay. We'll make that change. Any additional items? Any objections to that change? All right, all those in favor of the motion, aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes. Superintendent's report.
Yes, so before I get to some of the things I've listed here, we have started our second week of summer school. We were talking earlier about it raining just as summer school got out today and pouring, actually. And we are in the second week of our first session. So we have four options, 8, 9, 10, and 11 through each of our sessions. We have three sessions that run. One runs now until the end of this week. We have another that runs from July 8th through the 18th, and the final one is the 22nd through August 1st. So as we look at those four sessions that are running, we have approximately 433 students enrolled in our first session. That second session that runs from July 8th through 18th, approximately 480 students. And that third session from July 22nd to August 1st, about 444. So we're 400 students actively involved in our summer school programming over the next 5 weeks now. 6 weeks, I guess we take next week off with the 4th. So it's great to see students actively engaged in some different activities and learning and having fun at the same time. And then also I want to extend congratulations to 3 of our schools, Woodview Elementary first for bronze level PBIS implementation, and then to Kennedy and John Long Middle School for silver level PBIS implementation, as recognized by Wisconsin RTI Center, which is Response to Intervention, and Wisconsin DPI. So congratulations to them. The letters that were sent from those DPI and RTI are included in our board packet. We want to thank our staff for all the work they're doing on improving our environment for our students, and it's great to be recognized at the state level in that way. And then also on June 2nd, we had our class 2019 graduated. So congratulations to those 188 members of the class 2019. Thanks to Mr. Manti and his staff for really setting up a great day. The weather cooperated, which was nice, but also just a great celebration for that class. Great students represented that day, whether they're singing or performing or speaking during that time, and great to celebrate them on June 2nd. And then we have a number of things that have occurred with seniors, and then also our final spring sports things. So I've asked Mr. Manti and Mr. Moore to walk us through those.
Yes, so I will take the GHS seniors who earned special recognition. As Jeff indicated, we had a great graduation ceremony on June 2nd. Thanks to all the board members for your attendance at that event. It's great to see you there. So the seniors that earned our special recognitions, our valedictorian was Carter Day, salutatorian Shashank Bangalore, and then we also recognized our academic top 10 students, Shashank Bangalore, Carter Day, Stacy Ducheney, Lydia Fisher, Brianna Jetter, Daniel Lahosik, Samuel Peters, Daniel Krahuska, Laura Stockhausen, and Scott Wolf. So congratulations to all those students and their significant accomplishments over the course of the last 4 years. We wish all of our seniors the best of luck as they move on past Grafton High School.
And then on an athletic front, I'm very happy to say that we experienced a lot of successes over the course of the spring sports season. A credit to a lot of great student athletes and outstanding coaches. Start with girls soccer. The team finished the season ranked number 2 in Division III. According to coaches poll, statewide poll, they finished second in the North Shore Conference. They were regional champion. They were sectional finalists. All conference honors first team with a Haley Block at midfield. She was also the conference player of the year, and she also earned first team all-state honors. First team was also Abby Schad. Second team went to Malaya Sperber. An honorable mention to Kenzie Schultz, Brianna Rapp, and Corbin Wasner. Baseball was also a regional champion in a sectional qualifier. All conference team members included first team member Tommy Lamb, pitcher, who's also honorable mention all-state. First team was also senior Jake Garnkars, and second team senior Zach Merkel. Honorable mention was Jacob Alkanowicz. Softball also had a first team all-conference member, Kirsten Krause, as a utility, meaning she both as a pitcher and as an infielder hitter. Boys track gave us our third regional champion of the spring. State qualifiers included Dylan Mersch at the discus and Xander Lahosik in the 3,200 meters, who also finished third overall at state, which means he podiumed. Girls track just missed regional champion by a few points. They were regional runners-up. State qualifiers included the 4x200 meter relay, Delaney Rindle, Kirsten Van Ryzen, Morgan Rona, and Ava Wilmans. The 4x400 meter relay, Delaney Rindle, Morgan Rona, Maddie Willie, and Kate Incision. The 4x800 meter relay, Julia Willie, Maddie Willie, Elise Lewick, and Morgan Rona. Taylor Weiss in the shot put, and Julia Willie in the 3,200. Our golf team qualified for team sectional, meaning they finished in the top 4 of their regional. And our boys tennis team qualified one of our members, Shantanu Trihardi, for subsection. We got past the first round of the past season.
So the high school continued to have a great spring athletically. It's great to see the academic prowess of some of our students as well. I wanted to bring that to the board and our community's attention. And that concludes my report.
Thanks, Jeff. Yes, I'd just like to add to that, Scott, thank you to you and all those that had a direct job and role to play in graduation. I've heard many positive comments throughout the community about how great the ceremony was, as well as the scholarship and the awards that our students are receiving. That speaks highly of the work that everyone's doing, and the entire staff as well. It's great representation to see them there and send those seniors off in a very positive way. So thank you very much. Any questions for Jeff or for Scott or Kevin? All right, then we had one committee meeting. The curriculum committee met on June 10th. Here.
Yes, it met. We discussed the Canvas implementation both at the high school and the middle school. Great progress has been made this year where every course has at least every teacher has at least one of their courses fully implemented. They're going to be doing even more next year. There's a schedule, and it's going to become more interactive. So that was really stressed, how to become more interactive with quizzes and discussions, more online interaction with the students. And it was a great success with the online learning day. We also discussed the elementary schedule with a presentation from the 2 elementary school principals. A good job. This year was their first year with a new schedule, trying to do different sections and blocks and making their specials. And they found with some adjustments what would work best with input from their teachers regarding when a longer block was needed versus shorter blocks, and how to schedule it more so that students didn't feel rushed at the end or felt like they were getting the time they needed. For some grades it was more broken up. Some of them need longer blocks to do more in depth. And then finally, it was approval of some academic clubs. The school district feels time that they need these instituted for the upcoming fall, including Math Olympiad, National Spelling Bee, the Grafton Robotics League, and Battle of the Books. And the committee agreed with that recommendation, is bringing to the full board, and I would assume that's also included in the new athletic extracurricular positions, item H tonight.
Thank you, Carrie. Any questions for Carrie? Moving on, we have a few items on the personnel report.
Yes, we'd ask for the board's approval for both some resignations as well as some new hires. The resignation of Kristen Dillahunt, music teacher at Kennedy Elementary School, as well as new hires of Olivia Donica, kindergarten teacher at Woodview Elementary, Justin Gum, Fayed teacher at Grafton High School, and Rachel Stein, instrumental music teacher at Grafton High School. Informational only, the resignations of Isabel Dombrowski, a special ed aide at John Long Middle School, Catherine McCauley, a library media aide at Grafton High School, and then retirement is Marianne Stecker, a special ed aide from Woodview Elementary School. Marianne's been with us for 15 years, and we invited her to come tonight. She was not able to make it, But we do have just as we do with all of our retirements, we do have a apparel item that we've ordered for her, and we have that for her. So we want to recognize her. She's not leaving us for another position, another district. She's actually retiring. You've seen her, whether you're at the elementary level or whether you come to an athletic event, you've seen Mary Ann at a ton of different things, and she would be sorely missed, and so we want to wish her well and thank her for her years of service with our kids and at all levels across our district.
Okay, so for the first part, we do need a motion to accept the resignation of Christian Dilmahunt, music teacher at Kennedy Elementary.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on that resignation? All those in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that passes. And then we need a motion to accept the recommendation for the new hires of Olivia Danica, Justin Gum, and Rachel Stein.
Second.
Any questions regarding those new hires? All right, all those in favor of the motion, aye. Aye. Opposed, and that passes. And on behalf of the board as well, from Mary Ann Stecker, we wish her well in retirement and thank her for her many years of service to the district. Grafton Education Foundation grants.
Yes, so the Grafton Educational Foundation, we're fortunate to have them be a supporter of our district, and over the last 9 years they've given over $300,000 to our students. They've just recently had their grants passed out, and so we thought now would be a great time to have them come and share with the board the exciting things that happened here that last week of school, and have our community be aware of all the great work they're doing. So I will turn it over to someone, Ms. Bigler. I'm turning over to Michelle, and that'd be great if you wouldn't mind. It looks like we have Michelle and Tammy and Bob and Chris and Mike and Amanda joining us this evening, which is great.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting us here tonight. The Grafton Education Foundation, as many of you know, our mission is to enhance the educational opportunities for the Grafton Public School District. We encourage and foster increased partnerships with the community, local businesses, and schools. We solicit private funds, direct donations, grants, and fundraisers, like the color blast that we just had, and then we use it to award educational grants. We fund academic experiences that align with our mission.
Good evening. Over the years, we've been in a position to award 80 grants. We started in 2011 awarding grants, and that year we granted $12,060. This past month, we almost gave out $62,000 in grants, so we're pretty excited about that. We hovered, back in 2011, we were in the 11,000 range, and then for several years we were in the 20s, and then 30s, 40s. In the last couple of years, we've been in the 60 mark, so we're excited about that. And we had the opportunity this year to grant all the grants teachers applied for, so we gave out 10 grants district-wide, so the impact on every school is pretty positive, and we're excited to see what happens. The impact that these grants are having in the classroom is pretty powerful, and we're pretty proud of that. Michelle Bigler is going to be our incoming president this year of GEF. Amanda Brennan has been very instrumental in our Seeds to Harvest campaign this past year and prior to that as well. And then we have our past president club right here. Mike's out of here, Chris Hogan, and Bob Hoffman. Bob and Mike were the founders of the Grafton Education Foundation. So we are excited to present this check to you for $61,762.
Great.
Thank you.
Include. You guys want to bring these come this way? Yep. Bring your check over here, and the board will join you. We'll get a picture of all of you. Mr. Donahue, I can't see you. Mr. Donahue? You're going the wrong way, Mike. Maybe come this way. Very, yeah, nice try. Here we go. Okay, I can see it when they're ready. Ready? Not Mr. Donahue. Ready? 1, 2, 3, and one more. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Grafton Education Foundation.
Yeah, I'd just like to say on behalf of the board, thank you all for taking time to come out tonight and for the work that you put into the Grafton Education Foundation and all of the ways in which it touches the district and touches our students. It is tremendously appreciated, and the progress is wonderful to see to date, and we like to see that keep going. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
And thanks to all the principals, all the leadership, and Jeff for helping us promote the grants this past year. And this past year, we did something different. Instead of storming into the classrooms to deliver the checks, we, at the end of the school year luncheon, teacher luncheons, we presented the checks. And I think that worked out very well.
And I'd like to say a special thanks to Dr. Gunderson, who won the color blast. He was a great sport. And that event. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. All right. Next up is the WIAA membership renewal.
So this is something that we need to have on our agenda to say that we agree, that the board agrees with us staying with the WIA. There is no fees attached to it, but it is something that we need to have signed and have a board agenda showing that we agree to be in the WIA for all of our sporting events. So we are just asking for the board to approve us being in the WIA for the 2019-20 school year.
I will make a motion to approve being in the WIAA for the 2019-20 school year.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes. Next on to the Southeastern Wisconsin School Alliance membership.
This is also an annual agreement that we have had for a number of years now with the Southeastern Wisconsin School Alliance agreement, whereby we have a SWSA fee. You can see the schools that are listed as well. There are two that are at a lower number than everyone else, and I believe that's because they have board members who serve in leadership roles on that. But it allows, we contract with Howard Wilson and Zelenka to serve as legislative counsel for our alliance, and we have some opportunities through that that we get through this fee. And so we need an annual agreement that we do with other schools in our area for $3,200. So we're looking for a motion to approve continuing being part of the Southeastern Wisconsin School Alliance.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. Any discussion regarding our participation in the Southeastern Wisconsin School Alliance? I'm assuming the fee is the same as it was last year, if memory serves.
It has not gone up yet.
And we're still getting the value for the minor amount?
We believe so.
Past,
Yep.
Good data.
Yep, good data that we've gotten and opportunities to get timely information on various pieces as well.
If anyone, can I say something? If anyone's interested in going to the meetings, they're once a month on Tuesday mornings. I know I've been to several of them, but with my schedule, I'm not able to make it as much, so I could forward that information to anyone and everyone who might be interested on the board.
Yeah, I'm hoping to be able to attend some of those meetings myself now that we have construction meetings on. It's in Pewaukee is where it occurs.
Elmbrook School?
Excuse me, Elm Grove.
Yeah.
You're right, yeah,
Yeah.
Brookfield is where it occurs. But
Yeah, and it's around, I think, 7:30 in the morning.
Is there a set?
It is. I can forward that to you.
Yeah, why don't you get it to Karen, and then we should...
Second and third one, yeah.
do you all get that email from SWSA?
Did you get it?
Yeah, I get an email. Okay, you can look into that. You can ask, but yeah, they send various updates.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll get the schedule.
I'll look at
Yes.
Yeah.
Get this here.
It's for $300. It's a good deal.
All right, all those in favor of the motion, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? And it passes. Next, in a similar fashion, I believe,
It
is
is.
our contract for CISA services for 2019-2020.
Yes, so some of this we go through as a leadership team and with our principals to look to see are there various services that CISA 1 can provide to us that maybe would be less expensive than us hiring someone on our own. So you see that with like the teacher of the blind and visually impaired, where it's based on a number of hours or units and the cost that goes with it. Some of these Distinguished Scholars Academy or Ozark Community High School are alternative schools that we have for students who would be better served in a different learning environment than a traditional school setting, as well as just our basic flat service fee, the professional advisory committee, and then the school improvement services network that we utilize through SIS, that we have Diana and Laura go to at various times, depending on maybe even Rick, depending on the topics and so forth. So we utilize that. So we've gone through to see what we've used various things in the past, but this is what we utilize. We have grant allocations that cover some of them, but you can see that the projected cost for the 1920 school year is $106,000. But we would ask the board to approve this contract with CISA 1 next year.
I'll make a motion to approve the CISA contract for the upcoming school year.
Give a second.
Second.
All right, now, we have a contract, we have a representative, John, I believe you are the representative. You agree to continue to serve in that capacity?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion made to approve this contract, seconded, and a representative. So all those in favor of the motion, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? And it passes also. Thanks, John. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right, staff handbook updates.
So it's also time for us to be looking ahead to next school year. And in doing that, we have a number of things that are coming up next on our agenda. But first will be the staff handbook updates, what goes with language revisions, as well as Carrie mentioned, both some extracurricular positions, but also some athletic positions. And Topher has outlined a lot of those things for us, and will walk us through those.
All right, so first I'll start with the changes to the traditional portion of the handbook before I get into the extracurricular and the co-curricular positions. So in your packet, you'll have some marked up pages. First section is paid leaves. That's on page 29. In this section that we are basically allowing our hourly people who work less than 30 hours 2 sick days to use. This is up from none that we've done in the past. So that's what this first change addresses on page 29. As we move into, and I'll go through these particular changes, and then we can come back and see if you have any questions. Then we have the portion added to employee resignations. We just added some language that would give the district options for collecting the liquidated damages. This is also included in the contract language as well. Then on page 7 of the professional handbook, we inadvertently had taken out the notice deadline, so we have put that back in. And then we also have language outlining changes to how the retirement benefit is structured, having it step up from years 15 to years 20. And then on the last page, it continues along with that, just showing the language regarding FTE. If someone has 20 years in, but their FTE amounts to a total of, say, for example, 15. They're 75% the whole way through. Then they get 75% of the 20-year benefit. Are there any questions on any of these items?
On the sick days for school year employees working less than 30 hours per week, are they prorated? So it would be, if you're working 4 hours a day, your sick day benefit is 4 hours.
Correct. It's based on your workday.
Any additional questions?
All All right, and I'll just point out before we move on, at the bottom of the memo, it does point out that roughly the estimate would be that there would be about $8,000 of additional PTO next year with this change. Pay time off. All right, moving on to,
Do we need a motion to approve those changes?
this is also in the handbook, so we can do it all encompassing.
Altogether, okay.
So then, following that, you'll see, first of all, a reference point, so you can look up what our different the pay scales are for the athletic positions as well as the non-athletic. And on each section, you'll see a color-coded list of positions, orange being that they are currently in the handbook, but they aren't being used. So we would be putting in here, adopting this change would eliminate them from being listed in the handbook. In green, you'll see positions that are currently being used, as I mentioned in the memo. Most of these were created 3 or more years ago and have carried on. So we're bringing them forward to be included in the handbook. Then in blue, we do have some changes. And so we'll go through some of those as well. And then if it's in white, there's no change. So it's currently in the handbook, and it's currently currently used in that way. So looking at that first page, we see elementary as well as district-wide co-curriculars. On this page, I know these were discussed at the curriculum meeting, but if anyone has any questions regarding the elementary or district-wide co-curriculars, we can address those right now.
The only question I have, is there a reason why they're not assigned a classification that would be then ascribed to a dollar value?
So you're asking about the $300 and the $1,000.
Yeah.
When they were created many years ago, they were assigned that dollar value, and they've carried through since. I can't say why they weren't just assigned to a classification.
So in our working with principals and with other directors, we didn't look to change something. Someone who's been doing a position for 4 years, let's say, and then all of a sudden, well, your $300 one should really be, $263, or it should be $340. We weren't trying to make a value judgment on why is it 300 versus 263 versus 340, and we don't really know if we have enough information at this late time of the game to articulate to a staff member why they're getting a $37 pay cut or a $40 raise. As small as that is, having any kind of pay cut is not an encouragement for what they're doing. So our goal around this time was really to bring what we're currently doing, making you aware of it. Over the course of the year, we will review some of our pieces that we have to say, are some of these, should they be raised? Should they not be as high? Should we not have as many as we have currently? But our goal was not to almost arbitrarily, because we don't have enough data, we've started evaluating these positions and getting data, but we don't that's the background information for all of that we've left it at where they are. We'd want to have conversations with people to say, is this, how many hours are you putting into this? How many kids is this servicing before we make changes that would go with it? So we haven't assigned a classification. That will be a potential next step in the near future.
Yeah, and you'll see a number of items throughout this, for example, with the DI coaches at the bottom, where you have currently listed in the handbook a DI coach, but we're using DI coaches, but in a different way. So in green, you'll see what we're actually doing, and in orange, you'll see what's in the handbook that we're going to be eliminating in favor of how we're doing it right now.
And you'll notice the blue ones that are all new all have a classification that go with what our current is. So we're aligning what we're doing new with our classification that the board has approved in the past.
So moving on to John Long Middle School co-curriculars, the athletic piece. Again, you'll see in green, this is a position we've had for many years, the athletic director, and you'll also see the boys basketball and volleyball. Many positions are in orange. Those are B teams that no longer exist. Are there any questions on the athletic side of John Long Middle School?
These are what, for
They were B teams listed in, and we no longer have B teams, is that correct?
Correct. So about 5 years ago, many schools in our conference had 2 levels or multiple teams. And due to the number of students that have been coming out for those teams, a lot of schools elected to go to one team for the E. So we were in that group of schools that went to one team based on the number of kids that have been historically trying.
So these positions again have evolved, but the handbook never reflected those changes.
So is there options if you were to get a class or two that can add larger numbers to go back to the same team?
Right now, we don't have that option. You'd have to find another coach and then work that into scheduling. But that was the other conflict that they had when I talked to Mike Pfeiffer about. There's very few teams with that many school teams left, so that scheduling becomes kind of a tricky piece now that's been established for the past 5 years or so.
But for example, if you did, to sort of piggyback on what he said though, like we had an example this year where forensics at the middle school had 85 students, something like that, and we had 2 approved advisors. We brought another one on using the classification that's in the handbook. Because of the number of students, we saw it as being a good use of district funds to have 3 adults with that number of students. So if there were more students, then we would use that, but we just wouldn't create another classification. We would use the current classification. We've already approved that. If we had 2, if we had 3, but we wouldn't create, a different classification if it was based on student numbers. If students are out, then we would try and work with them in that way.
That you'd increase the number of positions.
Correct. That's exactly what we did for forensics, from 2 to 3. And if they have 50 kids, then we'd have to revisit, do we need 3?
All right, moving on to the academic side, which oddly enough does have basketball and volleyball listed. In orange are positions that are not currently being used or being used in that way. And then you do have green positions, coded green. Those are positions that are currently in existence, but are not in the handbook. Are there any questions regarding these? Again, I'll point out, you will see forensics, which has an old classification in there that we don't use, but rather a new one. I would also point out that I suspect the science club in orange has probably been replaced by the STEM club in green. Any questions regarding that? All right, and we will move on over to the activities at the high school. The list gets a little longer as we get to the older kids. Again, green are positions not listed in the handbook that we currently do have. Orange are positions in the handbook that are in the handbook but that we do not use any longer. And then we do have some items listed in blue that would be a change for next year. As you've had a chance to go through this, look at it, are there any questions regarding any of these items at the high school in terms of activities?
Good question.
So the ACT test coordinator that got added, removed. So I seen the one above that's orange.
Yeah,
Classification.
different classification.
Any additional questions?
All right, moving on to high school athletics. Again, most of these are white. There's no change. They're in the handbook. We use them, but we do have some positions that are essentially changing, either because they're being added, they're changed of classification, or they are no longer needed, essentially. So you can go through, and a good example on that second page is hockey. We don't, it's in the handbook, but we don't have a hockey team where we hire a coach. Are there any questions regarding any of these positions and the changes?
questions?
That's what Kevin
For
said, so.
JLMS, Math Olympiad is a K-8, so JLMS means a Math Olympiad. I just want to make sure that that's noted. It would be a classification for new.
Is that not in there?
I didn't catch it.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to make sure before we, so that's part of the approval process, I know we brought up that the curriculum piece, but that's K-8, not just like elementary.
Sure, okay. Yeah, that should probably be in there then. So please note that, Math Olympiad at John Muir Middle School. If you can.
Any final question? Anything else regarding the staff handbook changes?
That is all. We would just be looking for a motion to approve.
All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve the staff handbook updates as presented. So motion.
Yes, so moved.
Second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, aye. Aye. Opposed? And it passes. And certainly appreciate yet another administrative element that needed to be cleaned up, especially as it relates to these co-curricular and coaching activities. It's something that I think tends to get lost over time, and it's good that we take a fresh look at it on a periodic basis, maybe even annually going forward, to ensure that we have the right classifications and the right people in the right spots.
Yeah, Carrie, if you scroll down to the high school one, some of these are driven by the number of student athletes that we have as well. So you look at like football on there right away, keep going. You know, the number of students that they have coming out, that's why you see an assistant at large. You look at wrestling, having a varsity assistant, that's driven by numbers of students and so forth. And so that may vary depending on the year, but to have it in the handbook as an opportunity to be able to bring someone on board is really something that then TOEFR is able to budget for and be able to do it. But it's student driven in that way, and it's great to see, you know, whether it's activities or athletics doing well and having kids involved. We want to make sure that we have the opportunity to meet their needs in that way.
Good. Yes. All right, thank you. Now to TOEFR U for 2019-20 workers' compensation liability and property insurance renewals.
Yes, this has been a difficult renewal year for our various lines regarding property and casualty. I included a handout from Gallagher outlining some of the reasons for the changes in the premiums. I will point out a couple of lines that are especially challenged. First of all, since we have it on the board, I'll go down to workers' comp. So our workers' comp is a multiplier of what our premium is. And as you can see basically in 2017-18, okay, we had 15-16, 14-15, and 13-14 experience, if you will, our claim experience in there. Now, I don't have what 13-14 is, but rest assured, as we go to when we add on 16-17 and 13-14 drops off, it's more than 3%. So we're replacing a higher number with that 3% claim activity. That's why you see the drop in the experience mod from 1.4 to 1.01. I'm pointing this out to kind of show where we're going, where we are going, and where we're going to be going. So last year we had that mod of 1.01. That's why we had the drop of nearly $40,000 in our workers' comp premium. Coming into this year, we're having that 14-15 year 100% drop off. It's being replaced with a claim experience of 169%, which is why you see the experience mod go to 1.32. Now we are benefiting from the fact that our food service is being outsourced, and so that part of payroll is being pulled out of workers' comp. So that initial premium that's being multiplied by the 1.32 is much smaller. I think it's around the 121,000. If we still had them in payroll, we would likely be looking at something that was between 135 and 140,000. Now, looking forward into the future, we're expecting to have increases, continued increases in our workers' comp premium. When you look ahead to the 2020-2021 renewal, that 18-19 claim experience is going to come on board, which right now sits at 132%. That will be replacing the 63% from 15-16 that drops off. So that experience mod is going to increase. Also, in 2021-2022, we don't know what our 1920 claims experience is going to be, but it would need to be a spectacular year to not increase our experience mod, because we have a 3% claim experience dropping off from 16 to 17. So I wanted to bring that piece forward with regards to our workers' comp, just to talk about the increase this year, but also the expected increases in future years. Are there any questions in particular about workers' comp?
What's driving the increase? Severity, frequency?
It's a particularly severity. So our frequency is going up. We have roughly in lost claims. So 4 years ago it was 8, and followed by 6, and then we've had 11 claims the past 2 years. And in terms of severity, we had 1 severe claim 4 years ago, none the following year. In the last 2 years, we've had 2 claims that were severe, and then this past year we had 1. And we have had addressed some of those issues, whether it's, I think a big piece would be making sure our teachers don't participate, but rather demonstrate. Getting involved in the games, whether it's coaches, FIED instructors, or even teachers involved in a physical activity. Stressing, and we'll need to do this at the beginning of every year when we orient staff coming in, for current staff as well as new staff, that they really need to be demonstrating techniques, but not engaged in the technique themselves. If you're going to have kickball and FIED, have the kids play kickball, but don't go out and play center field with them to risk injury. We also have, I think, some education to do around what kind of equipment to use when hanging things up in the classroom, step stools, making sure those are provided for teachers, making sure they aren't on swivel chairs when trying to hang things up in the room. So there are different pieces that we need to continue to reiterate to staff going forward. But it's been slips, trips, and falls that have been tripping us up. All right, and then moving on to the property piece, as everyone's well aware, we had some claims on our property insurance. The big one being the water main break. And the water main break occurred technically in the 17-18 year. It's right at the end of June. We have had claims there. It was roughly $465,000 in claim experience there. $423,000 that the district essentially expensed and then was reimbursed through insurance, and about $43,000 in expenses in terms of investigation and into those claims. And then we also did have, this past year, we had a pool overflow which resulted in a little over $20,000 in damage at the high school as well. So that is a big portion of our increased property insurance. We also have the belief in our carrier that our high school was not insured for enough of a replacement cost. Not to say that we wouldn't have had enough insurance to cover this, because there's a sort of a blanket coverage that will cover all of our schools, but our carrier is saying that we don't have the proper valuing for our high school. So we're looking into having our schools valued, an evaluation done, especially with all the work that's been done relative to a year ago. Are there any questions regarding the property insurance?
What is the recommendation to have for the approvals? for the appraisals? Like how many every year, 4 years, 5 years?
They would probably say, and everyone varies, but probably 5 years is probably about what you'd have. You get a good appraisal, you can keep updating it year after year. Certainly when you do enough work, like we've done, then that's a good time to do an appraisal.
How does the dividend work on the bottom? So the schedule that you have here, the non-workers' comp plus the workers' comp is total without dividend. Is that the
Correct.
expected dividend?
Correct. So, and
Put that against
everything
expense?
with workers' comp tends to be off years, if you will. So that 7% dividend will be paid out next year, but on this year's dividend. Then the new 5% dividend in our renewal, that will be paid out in 2020-21 off of our 2019-20 premium. And it's basically, it's based off of our premium. That's how it's calculated. And the better your claim activity, typically the better an offer of premium you would get.
But when we record that, do we record that as a revenue item, or do we record that as a reduction of expense?
As a revenue item.
As a revenue item in the year of receipt. Any questions regarding the property casualty and workers' comp insurance renewal? Any additional questions? Nothing. Entertain a motion to accept the administrative recommendation to approve the 2018-19 workers' comp, general liability, auto liability, educated legal liability umbrella, equipment breakdown, crimes, cyber, and property policies as reviewed. So moved.
Second.
Last discussion. All those in favor of the motion, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. 2019-20 budget, total line here.
All right, so I'll go through this presentation, which will be very familiar. We looked at these issues and these items starting in January, reviewed them again at the Finance Committee in May, as well as the full board meeting in May. So I'll be giving you a review of some of the same information and also updates on what's happened since May. Thank you.
Sorry, wrong mouse.
So as we've been using from the beginning of this process for expenditures, we have some assumptions for salaries. That is a 2.5% salary increase for returning teachers. That includes standard wage increase, longevity bumps. And it does also include, this is a slight change, the expected LBC participation rather than the full LBC participation, which I'll point out later does obviously help the budget. Then we also have a 2.5% increase in salaries for all other employee groups. We're assuming 10% health insurance renewals, 5% dental insurance renewal. At all new hires, we budget with family benefits, although we have had at least one new hire commit to what their benefits are. So as we learn what their benefits are, we'll update the budget. But I think other than one new hire, right now we're budgeting family benefits. And we have a decrease in OPEB costs, again, related to a change made many years ago where new retirees do not qualify for insurance in retirement. Then we have 3% utility cost increases, We have an increase in private school choice tuition, which does not affect our bottom line budget because we receive the authority to levy additional tax to cover that cost, but it does affect our mill rate. We have a $42,000 increase in expected open enrollment out tuition. Again, this has been talked about a number of times. We do not have the line item for classroom upgrades of $416,000 and other line items adjusted as necessary. For revenues, we have an adjusted revenue limit decrease of $237,000. This is due to our decrease of our 3-year membership average, projected membership average, from 2002 last year to 1979 next year. This also accounts for the $175 increase in the maximum revenue per member allowed. We also are budgeting for a $34,433 increase in per pupil aid. This is due to the $25 increase in per pupil amount, coupled with that drop in the 3-year membership average. Then the categorical aid reimbursement, essentially, that percentage is increasing for next year. We're budgeting an additional $46,000 in revenue there. We are also budgeting a $46,000 decrease in open enrollment in tuition when other line items adjusted as necessary. So getting to that revenue projection, you'll see there's that decrease in that initial calculation, the $237,000. Now, what's interesting, at least to me anyway, is that a change in our 3-year membership average. So you take that 1,979. If that were to actually increase, then that would increase our initial revenue limit calculation. However, that would be balanced out by a declining enrollment exemption. So in many respects, we're kind of locked in to this number. If the 1,979 came in at less than that number, our initial calculation would be lowered, but then our declining enrollment exemption would go up, and they would balance each other out. So that's somewhat locked in. And then you can see we've got the additional funds from the per pupil aid change, the special ed change, all those Grafton together, the decrease in the revenue limit with some of the increases in other areas, roughly a decrease in $156,000 for next year. And that's, again, we've looked at this many times as well, the membership projection. We have larger class sizes in our senior, junior, and sophomore classes. As they graduate, we aren't necessarily able to replace them fully. And then you can see, though, as the smaller classes start graduating, our membership begins to level out. So the open enrollment piece, both in and out, where we are expecting or budgeting for a decrease in open enrollment revenue in, that's the red bar. We not necessarily had less students coming in new than going out, but we've had large high school groups of open enrollment students who are graduating, not necessarily fully replacing them. Then we have increases in the expenditure, and part of that is due to the fact that every year they do increase the dollar amount that gets paid for that tuition. So the net revenue in is projected to decrease. So we have that budgeted, so we're better prepared when we get those final changes and know what they are in October. Here's our private school choice expenditure, which I showed earlier. Changes over the years have allowed more students to become eligible to participate in this program. So we are projecting a budget increase that would take us to about $250,000 next year. Again, that increase is essentially doesn't impact our bottom line budget because we'll be able to levy a tax to cover that additional cost, but it does affect our mill rate. Since May, we've had some budget adjustments. We have had a number of hires, and we've been able to start plugging in the new salaries for hires. Initially, we had a mix of some very veteran teachers as well as some younger teachers who were leaving. We did not change that mix of salary. And so as we moved through May, we had some of those hires, mainly the younger teachers, if you will. But now we've been getting through the hiring process for some of our more veteran teachers. So when we start plugging in all those new salaries, we are seeing a reduction in salary overall. And you'll see that in the object budget. And on the first page, the object budget, you'll see that that salary line does decrease from May, basically. Part of that also is that expected LDC piece, roughly $15,000 less than the essentially the full participation. In addition, and these first 5 items, by the way, these are all good things because these are all helping the budget. So the transportation budget in our regular education, that decreased $50,000 from May. We are close to the end of the year having final numbers. We did hold a lot in the budget this year because so much was unknown with new attendance boundaries. We weren't sure how many kind of adjustments might have to be made to our routes. We did make adjustments, but we didn't have to add any. We didn't have, we were able to decrease, obviously, many of the shuttles that went back and forth. Being that we've lived a year through this, we can go ahead and budget that new amount, if you will, taking advantage of more of a known quantity without transportation. In this piece, the credit card rebates, so we have I should probably point out which line item that is. I have that in here somewhere. That would be the prior year refund. So that would be, I believe, in expenditures in Fund 10, Object 971. We have been budgeting $6,000. We should be able to budget $31,000 a year in that budget line for credit card rebates. So that is also an additional revenue that we are budgeting for. And then special ed contracted instruction, that's a decrease of $55,000 overall. We have a couple things working in there. That is a decrease in our use of substitute teachers in special education and for our aides in special education, but also we have some students that were attending a program outside the district that are no longer participating, or I should say, we're not anticipating any participation in that program this year. So that all coupled together means a reduction in that special ed contracted instruction of $55,000 from the budget we had there in May. As we talked about earlier, though, we do have one area that was a bit negative, and that's our insurance renewals. Property insurance came in higher than expected, along with some of the other line items that had adjustments higher, costing us roughly $30,000. Overall, what that we have now is we have a balanced budget with all of those adjustments. And if we take a look at our expenditures, you'll see salaries do increase slightly over last year, with benefits increasing 2.5%. Again, that's with 10% health insurance, 5% dental, but also a decrease in OPEC costs. And we have a large decrease in purchase services and the supplies and equipment, and that is influenced quite a bit by the fact that we don't have those line items in next year's budget for the classroom upgrades, and then in all others, that is being affected by our insurance renewals. And overall, that is a decrease by 0.2% in our expenditures compared to last year. Then in Fund 10 and Fund 27 for revenues, we have that decrease in our Fund 10 revenue limit authority. And again, that does get affected by that private school choice exemption, because that gives us additional authority, even though we can't really, that's not anything we can actually spend. So we have that decrease in our Fund 10 revenue limit authority. We have the decrease in open enrollment tuition revenue, the increase in the per pupil aid, and special education aid I mentioned before, and then all other items had an increase of roughly $100,000, and that would include the items such as the credit card rebates that we're expecting more revenue. And again, that balances out with our expenditures, the decrease of revenue from last year of about $61,000. Next steps, we're looking for approval for this budget, preliminary budget tonight to use starting July 1. Through the summer, we'll continue to analyze the budget as we close the year, make adjustments on needs for next year as we get more teacher hires, as we get teachers selecting their benefits, we'll make those adjustments. At the August board meeting, we'll approve the published budget, which we will then present at the September annual meeting. Final budget information will come in early October, which we will use and meet about at a finance committee meeting in October, and then take to the full board for approval at the October board meeting. Any questions on the preliminary budget for 2019-2020?
So for what's the expected LBC calculation rate that you're using?
It would be about $50,000, brought down from about $65,000.
Other questions? So where are fees? We spent a long time discussing fees for facilities. Is that in rentals?
It is. I did not make an
293?
adjustment at that point for rentals at this point.
So we're holding that flat.
Yes. Some of that takes into account essentially that we are allowing for in-kind donations which will go to programs. For example, with basketball, we will not receive revenue for that necessarily because we will allow an in-kind donation to the basketball program, which would mean it would be a revenue in our fund head.
And in our discussions with various groups, it appears that will be the direction that they will go in. And so except on weekend things when they have to, but that will be paying for the custodial costs. So there's a cost basis there. So that's why we're holding it flat.
And then insurance dividends and reimbursements in 974 on the revenue side. How does that correlate to the workers' comp dividend we just talked about earlier? Is that the same line item?
That is, and there are other items in there as well. And I can't name them at this moment, but that's where that would go.
So 5%.
Well, we want to see 7% this year off of that. It would be the following year where we would be receiving 5%, but off of a higher number.
Okay. So the other things are just as much as the dividend. Right. All right. And that adjustment for, I think you said in your presentation, was $316,000 or so, $416,000 associated with construction-related expenditures.
Yeah, classroom upgrades.
Is that the $306,000 in object account 327?
That was. So you had the 327. That was the 306,000. Then you had roughly $100,000 in these 551.
Okay. Any update on the insurance renewals? Health and dental?
We'll be meeting in July.
In July.
It'll be a difficult period.
But the assumptions that we have here should cover that difficulty?
We'll find out much more in July. we may need to make adjustments to make that 10% renewal,
Okay.
or adjustments if we want it to be lower.
Okay. And that we do at a finance committee meeting?
Yep, July 8th. I believe it's probably at 6 p.m.
All right, any other questions regarding the balanced budget? Likelihood that we have no more defectors on the Republican side for this budget? And odds that Governor Evers signs?
Correct.
You'll give
It's called
them-
gambling.
Pardon?
That's called gambling. I don't know, yeah, that's a hard question. Will we be back at square one or not?
Right.
It sounds like it's very tight right now.
Okay. But based upon the best information we have right now, this is our budget. It's balanced.
Yeah, this would be based, on the Republican side, it sounds as though Governor Evers wants more money going to education, but whether that will occur or not.
Two Republican senators in the Senate have already come out saying they won't approve the budget because it's, even the one that we have that has $500 million in for education is too much spending.
It's too much, that's correct.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve the preliminary budget as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion?
You don't need to.
All those in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
We got an answer.
We'll await further updates. Thank you so far.
Sure.
All right, moving on to item K, baseball and softball field construction services contract.
All right, so in front of you, you should have a contract to take care of our softball and baseball field turf from Midwest Sports and Turf Systems. It is, we're quite pleased to be able to bring this forward. We had been budgeting significantly more for the potential of turf. I believe that number was where were we at with that? 525. So we have right now a contract to do the work for about $370. So we're pleased to bring this forward. This would allow us to do that work. This would allow us room under the funds that have been given to put forward toward baseball and softball. So it also give us assurances that we would be able to develop the junior varsity baseball field over at John Long Middle School. This allows any unforeseen costs that might come up with bad soils or what have you. And if that did not come up, then we might be able to take care of some other items, such as having turf down the foul poles or enhanced dugouts or whatever might be potential. But right now, we're looking at just approving this base contract for installing the turf systems beginning ASAP. This will allow us to be in the ground essentially August 1st. This will allow us to have the turf in place and being used next spring.
Are we going to get a quote or what it's going to cost to move the JV field to John Long?
We will, yes. And initially, the initial quote we had along with the 525 or the 575 was 525. Was two set.
It's 575, so there's a bit of a difference there.
It was 525, and then is that say 5? That's right. They did increase it. The original from a number of years ago was the 525 for JV, and then the 275.
275 for JV.
Thank you. So they looked at it and said, based on what you would expect increase-wise, it would be 575. In addition, looking at the JV field, if it used to be, if an initial estimate from a couple of years ago, or really it was last summer, was 275, one would expect that those costs would go up to in the neighborhood of $300,000. Obviously, you see these numbers came in lower, but if that comes in at $300,000, then that would be expected to be fit certainly under the budget, but we would move forward with getting cost estimates on that.
And just for clarification, so the renderings that got submitted, so everything that's there is what ends up being turf then. So it's inside the line of play and outside. The same as the other one.
Correct.
What impact do these plans and this contract have on the areas that butt up to the turf? I think, I can't remember his name, but the representative from the beginning said we want to make sure that those are properly addressed as we're putting turf in at this point in time, to ensure that there's nothing that needs to be done down the road.
Sure, that would be part of the installation, is making sure you have everything in proper working order, if you will. Making sure that you don't have a drop off or any sort of a tripping hazard, if you will, uneven fields.
There may be an opportunity, if you were to do the dugouts now, to have some cost savings for later, because this will be a different turf leading up into the dugout. So there may be an opportunity for that to be a cost savings, but that would need to be a piece that we would see what those cost savings are, and then work with the baseball, softball team for fundraising opportunities, if that were part of that. But that's the alternate bid would be running it all the way down to the foul lines on both softball and baseball, which would then allow you to not have to have a maintenance person out there striping a field for various games and so forth, and it would just be permanent that would go with it. But those are things that will come along as an alternate bid that goes into it, and Jamie's working with Jody Factor on, Jamie and Topher are working on that.
Other questions?
So going back to the April meeting, we approved the master plan, which didn't have this in there. Are we going to get a new master plan then, I would assume, that has the baseball project as the #1 priority?
Well, I don't know if you're going to name something a #1 or a #2, but this would be part of our plan moving forward.
I mean, just because we did name something 1, 2, 3, and 4 in April, but now I know I brought this up last time, but now this seems to be leapfrogging those, which means it's hard to say this is #1 if we're not spending the money on that, we're spending it on this.
Yep. And when administration developed those 4 phases, I think it's a great question, Jerry, and a great point. When administration developed those 4 phases were being either funded out of, we knew we were going to go to fundraising, or we knew that, for example, there's money that's in the 20-year long-range plan for replacing the grass at the football field, as well as the track in the stadium. So we knew that money, along with fundraising money, was going to address those 4 phases. We did not take into account the $800,000 that the board had previously set aside for baseball and softball and included it in those phases. So I can see what you mean. Like, it almost seems like we do have phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have a separate project going on. But that's why when I mentioned dugouts, I don't see that as being part of our phasing. It may become a part of a long-range master plan, but we haven't contracted with point of beginning to create that plan for baseball and softball. We know that turf was one of the big pieces that we had said, and I think originally, the board had said we wanted to move everything here, and then when we got the pricing and the cost was more than what we had thought what $800,000 was, we hit the pause button. We re-looked at, well, what are our options? What's the best long-term option? We discussed it multiple times at the board level. We finally tabled it there. We had multiple meetings with outside groups, with our current groups, then we brought it back again, because now the push was, well, if we're going to do this, in order to have it next spring, we need to have it by August 1st. And I know I had someone reach out to me, we're going to reach out and say, well, are there groups that are using it later in the summer into the fall? And I don't know that yet, but if there are, we'll be letting them know that as of August 1st they won't be, because we'll need to be able to have this in place for the spring, and they need to be able to get shovels in the ground at that point. So So we haven't, administration has not looked to say $800,000 from the board is set aside for baseball and softball is going into the phasing that we had set previously. So like the CUNY Foundation money that we've raised for gymnasium naming rights is going towards the phase one, isn't going towards the baseball softball complex.
And I know that was a board decision, but just to clarify, the 800,000, so we'll say 370 for rounding purposes, is coming out of that 800,000, but the remainder of that money, including the move of the JV field, is still coming out of that 800,000. I mean, the 800,000 is going to be spent on baseball, whether they raise money for dugouts or use that 800. It's kind of, here's 800,000 to spend however you, so it's a savings from the original, only in that, in theory, they won't have to fundraise to complete other projects potentially.
Yeah, potentially. But that's, it depends on what is the cost savings. This we were able to get at a reduced rate because we have one company doing both fields right next to each other. So they're doing the turf. Obviously, they're also someone that wants to also be looking at doing our stadium turf. And, they have, their recommendations are great. They're using other local companies, local districts are using them and having great success with them. We feel great utilizing them for their customer service and so forth. But will the needs at the baseball softball complex go over $800,000? I'm assuming yes, in all honesty. But that money is there to be used for that.
But if we believe that it's going to go over the $800,000, why wouldn't it be prudent for the board to understand what the total cost of that project is before we approve a contract for a portion of it? It seems to me that it would be wise that we would understand what the total cost of that project is before we would approve spending of $370,000 for a portion of it, without even having an understanding of how long it might take to finish that project. At least finish it to the expectations of the district.
Well, but you get into bleachers, you could get in, there's so many ancillary things. You could say, well, we'd like to have a nicer batting cage. We currently have a batting cage, but I'd like a nicer batting cage. I'd like this, I'd like that. Those are things that we currently have that they're utilizing. Would they like something nicer? That possibly could be true. We aren't getting into that with some of these other pieces of saying, we're going to ask for nicer benches in the stadium or nicer blank in the stadium that we currently have. We're talking about big picture items that are part of that process that go with it. At the soccer field, we aren't talking about getting new dugouts for soccer. The shelters that they had before that are gone now. That wasn't part of that $400,000 the board allocated. So I guess.
With the $800,000, we'll be able to create that complex at the middle school. And there's a possibility that we can complete other enhancements of that facility with the $800,000. They might want even more, and then in that case, we'd be looking at fundraising.
Right. And Paul, I guess my thought at the last meeting was this was a board decision. I don't know if that was even before Jeff, to allocate the 800. I couldn't remember if that was.
I was here.
Okay, so
it was early on, but I was here.
It was a board decision to allocate the 1.2 and 800 for baseball, softball. There's no savings in there. It's just how much can they do with it, because it's going to baseball and softball, which again, to me, potentially runs counter to administration's recommendations, which were stadium up here first. But then I feel like if we say we're going to spend $800,000 on baseball, softball, it's hard to have it both ways. To say, well, that's great that this came in under. Now they can also cover the moving of the JV field. Oh, and then we might have money. Well, now we can also upgrade the dugouts. When upgrading the dugouts might have been, and I'm not speaking for administration, but upgrading the dugouts for administration might have been item number 7 on the phases. But because the decision was made 3 years ago before a master plan, we're spending that money anyway, because we basically are saying, here's $800,000 for baseball, which is why I voted against it last time. One more reason is we have the money, taxpayer money, to spend. Now we have a more comprehensive master plan. It seems to make sense to follow it versus spending it because 3 years ago the board said we would spend it. So while it looks like a savings, it's,
And so that's where I would say, when I voted for the 800,000, originally it had been agreed upon that this was the estimate of what it was going to cost. When there was an original estimate on soccer many years ago, the project got done, and it was actually, it took a little bit, I mean, it was a little bit over, and then we had to find funding somewhere else. I didn't understand it to be that if we got savings, that then it was you can do whatever else you want with the money. It was, like, we approved to do this. I'm not sure I understood, like, hey, but if it only, we got a great deal, and it's only going to cost the district $400,000. Now you can do whatever you want with the $400,000. You can buy whatever you want for your team. It was, this is what we need for our team. The board said, we understand the fields need to be upgraded, and we'll, we got estimates, and it was about $800,000 to move the field and get the turf. So now coming in, I'm not sure I feel about that. Well, then it's whatever they feel like they would like to have to even more improve their field. Like the soccer, if they, it came in over, and yes, we managed to figure out the funding for that. But if they had said like, oh, it came in 100,000, we decided we want this too. Well, no, we said we got an estimate and said you wanted, I think it was, redo, re-level it because of flooding and stuff. If it came in cheaper, to me, that would be a saving for the district. It's not, great. It came in cheaper. Now we can also have.
Well,
I thought it was up to 800,000.
And I can see how you can do it like that as well. I mean, we're happy to be bringing forward good news that there's a savings, because you're right. Soccer came in, it wasn't much over, but in the scope of $400,000, but it was able to be covered in Jamie's budget. And so that was one of the rationales for the administration recommending this proposal, because it was one of the few that actually came in at 800,000. Everything else was over, some significantly over, and so to have this come in at a much smaller price point does give the board some leeway to say what does that remaining money look like, but it's still fulfilling, I guess. Some would say a promise that the board made, that the baseball, softball fields would be upgraded.
But I think I'd like to at least speak to that promise, as I think perhaps the only board member that was here when that promise was made. But this whole thing started in March of 2015 under Dr. Leitner's direction. He engaged point of the beginning, conduct an outdoor athletics facility review. I think, Jeff, you have that report, or that report is somewhere in the district. At that time, the play surfaces were determined to be in extremely poor shape. And at that point in time, we were about ready to move to referendum, the 2016 referendum, and the board directed administration to develop two questions for that referendum. $47.7 million for building additions and remodel, and $1.8 million for repairing and improving outdoor physical education, athletic, and community recreation areas. If you remember, at that point in time, that $1.8 million was going to get us a pot of 4 baseball fields at the John Long Middle School facility, and the varsity sports moved to the high school complex. That's what that $1.8 million was going to get us. The referendum failed, and we moved into Plan B, which was form a facilities advisory committee to look at a new referendum option or alternative. And in December of 16, that facilities advisory committee recommended that, based upon an estimate that was done at that point in time for $936,589, that athletic facilities should get done outside of the referendum. Right? That's how that came to be. And then we got into this big debate about, well, where should the fields be? I mean, should they be up at the high school? Should they stay at John Long Middle School? And over the next year, throughout 2017, we talked about different options. And as early as a year or 2 years ago, if you look at the board minutes, soccer was going to be addressed immediately. And again, all of this work at the athletic field was being done, or money earmarked and set aside, because the play surfaces were deemed to be in extremely poor shape. Now, it's my understanding that soccer was given priority because of a safety factor, right? And that was done in 17, if I'm not mistaken, 17 into 18. And since that point in time, all of the safety elements on the baseball and softball field have been addressed. Yes?
It's safe to plan.
Yes.
Right.
Out of Jamie's budget.
So all along, these numbers have just stayed with these 400,000 for soccer and 800,000 for baseball and softball, kind of stayed with those sports. But I'm not sure that they were ever intended necessarily to stay with those sports. What was intended by the board was to ensure that our play surfaces were safe, and that any urgent or immediate allocation of money was to address unsafe playing areas. Now fast forward even later, because I think there is some confusion. The master plan that was approved in April was a master plan associated with the high school complex only. And it was approved under the condition and with the information shared with the board that regardless of what happened with baseball, whether it stayed at the high school complex or it moved to the John Long Middle School complex, that master plan could accommodate either one, right? And that's, so I want to make sure that no one's confused or misunderstood. There was a master facilities plan for the high school only. And then, was it last meeting? I forget which meeting it was. We approved the location of the fields, the baseball fields. So this whole thing is, to Jerry's point, I think a bit disjointed in as much as we have approval for a master plan as it relates to the location of fields. But there really hasn't been any priority established to, I mean, there's priority for the high school facility, and then there's this quasi-commitment that was laid out there for baseball and softball. And I would venture to say that when that money was approved, I think I have that in here, the $800,000 was approved in August 27th of 18. It wasn't approved with any attachment to baseball and softball. It was approved as $800,000 to be funded through the Fund 41 debt levy process for athletic fields. So I don't know what any of that means, other than I think it's worthwhile if you believe that we have an issue of priority or presentation. I don't know which it is.
Well, my thought would be, I would ask administration to determine, here's the most important things for us. We then determine, here's the funds that we'll allocate towards those. Which is why, to me, it's disjointed. That, to me, is not on administration, that's on the board. Because part of at the May 29th meeting, board members, it was stated multiple times, maybe not to your point, but we had previously agreed to allocate this money to baseball. I wasn't on the board then, so I'm not going to debate that. But more information to me has come to light. We have a better, administration seems to have a much better plan now. So I would look to them to say, here's what's most important to us. And then, I mean, if we don't agree with them, I mean, we didn't all vote to move the JV field when it seemed like almost everybody wanted it moved. We can still disagree, but it seems to make most sense to say, here's what we think are the most pressing needs, and then fund them in that order. Or just change the order. You know, but and with baseball taken out of there, I guess we don't have that. My assumption is it would be number one. We're funding it first. With limited money, I mean, clearly there's only so much money to go around, whether there's extra money from acuity or, however it is. If administration says these are the most important things, then I'm inclined, which is why I voted to move JV, because Jamie said it would be best. The baseball coaches want it there. Scott wants the green space. It makes sense, so I'm okay with that. This, to me, seems outside of my understanding of the priorities.
What is outside of your understanding?
Baseball, turf for baseball. I like the idea of turf for baseball and softball, just not before we spend it on football and track and those things. Especially, like I said at the last meeting, we just had an extremely wet spring and they had to reschedule one game. So the urgency to me doesn't seem to be there. But in part because previously the board had said we would allocate this or contribute $800,000 to baseball, that we're doing that. That doesn't seem like a good reason to make, kind of double down on a maybe not as fully informed decision. I won't call it a bad decision, but all the information wasn't there. Different plan from administration now to say, okay, in light of this, just because a board said at one point we would do that doesn't mean it's still the best decision now.
And I would agree with that, Jerry. The other thing that I would say is that from a historical perspective, I believe that the urgency for allocating funds to athletic fields and the priority in which they got used was because of unsafe play spaces. Soccer came first because that was determined to be the most unsafe. Baseball and softball were next because they too were determined to be unsafe. And if they're no longer unsafe, then do we have the priorities right?
Right.
Or if they're safe, do we have the priorities right? That's number one. Number two, a historical reflection of our own work would suggest that $800,000 wasn't specifically earmarked per se to softball and baseball. And even if it was, I still contend that it would have been earmarked because the fields were determined to be unsafe, and we needed to get them safe. So I don't know where that leaves us.
Well, I agree with what both of you have said. And that's why I voted opposed last meeting. That what both of you are saying today makes a lot of sense to me. Seems like the priorities have changed. For what it's worth.
My memo from last month at the May board meeting said that in January 23rd, 2017, the board gave consensus to fund the proposed baseball, softball, soccer, and softball athletic field improvements outside the referendum. At the July 24th, 2017 board meetings, the board approved setting aside funds for the field improvements. 17-18 budget, $400,000 is allocated to soccer. With the field completed on budget for the fall 2018 season, $800,000 was allocated to upgrade baseball and softball fields. In March of 2018, so you fast forward from January to July, so we went away from the referendum, so we're going to fund it separately. July of 2017, the board approved setting those funds. March of 2018, official estimate came back, it was $1.1 million, it didn't include turf, so that's when we moved away from that. Then we discussed it in May of 2018, we discussed it, then leading into, we had more discussions in March 26th of 2018, May 29th, June 25th, July 23rd, August 27th, and then no action was taken until we brought it back here last month to say, if we're going to do this, then we need to move forward with it. So there's been a lot of discussions on this topic, and since July of 2017, have we developed a better, more comprehensive plan? Yeah, because at the time it wasn't a comprehensive plan. It was looking at what are the needs that went with that. That was the immediate piece. Soccer wasn't able to play games because of rain, and baseball and softball had been identified as needing things fixed, and so Jamie has continued to work with his budget to upgrade those facilities to make sure that our athletes, our student athletes, and the community that uses our fields are safe. That goes with that, in that time frame.
But isn't it so? And I don't disagree with everything that you stated. I think it's consistent with the history that I have.
Correct.
But I just want to make sure that, because it seems to me the premise of the money being allocated, as it was, $400,000 and $800,000, was a condition of that original report by point of beginning from 2015 that says that our fields are in extremely poor shape. And as a result, we needed to invest money to get them up to par. And initially that investment was going to come through the 2016 referendum, and that didn't pass.
Right.
The board then, in January of 2017, gave their consensus to funding the proposed improvements outside of the referendum. Right? And since then, these tags of $400,000 for soccer, $800,000 for baseball and softball just followed each of these projects. And they continue to follow each of these projects.
And those are based on the original bid package that was given, and we've kept the 800 there because 400,000 ended up being on budget for soccer. So it wasn't, we weren't in all these discussions, we weren't asking for more money or less money. We haven't taken the liberty to say, here's a phasing, therefore we should use that money towards this phasing.
And that hasn't been done by administration because of what you believe the board's intentions to be.
That's correct.
And I think that's fair.
I
want to be
think
clear.
that's
I
fair, too.
think
I
that's
appreciate that.
totally fair.
Because that's the truth.
But-
I believe the board has acted, and my job is to make the will of the board occur.
And that is why I stopped, because we did act last meeting, why I stopped short of saying and putting on the spot and saying, how would you prioritize them with baseball? Because it's
my
really
opinion
not
doesn't matter.
relevant. Because
I would 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
So would you, given time, come to a different priority?
Well, and before he answers, we're the ones who decided, though, last meeting to spend the money. So if he said, if Jeff said yes, I mean, didn't we already vote to do it anyway? I mean,
Was it
we
that
did
I
vote
voted
last
to
meeting
upgrade?
to
I
contribute
upgraded
800,000.
I didn't think it was.
We did.
You can get whatever.
I mean,
you want.
his
Something
feelings
cheaper,
on
I thought
it
it'd be a
are-
savings for.
I think that's a fair discussion for the board to have. I think there's multiple discussions you can have at this point, in all honesty.
And I want to have this, and I want to have them tonight so that we can make the right decision, the best decision for the community. And I just don't believe personally that we get a contract for $369,000 to put turf on the field without understanding what the total project might be. I don't think that's the right thing to do. And I appreciate that everybody could have input as to what that project might be, but somebody's got to go out and get that input. I mean, we did that for the master plan relative to the high school complex. We went out and we got input of what should this look like? What are the things that should be included?
We already had, but administration already did that work for the board. I can bring up whichever presentation you'd like me to bring up and show you the different things that were, when we were using Rattler, that outlined all those different things that went with that. The board did not take action at that time. If the board had taken action at that time to say yes, then those things would already be in place and moving forward. Since then, when the board said we'd like to take a pause on looking at baseball and softball, administration shifted its focus to a different area. And then we came back with this phasing piece of the stadium. We have this money in our long-range plan. We know that that getting rid of grass, moving to turf is not only going to benefit football, but our Phi-Ed facilities, our soccer, boys and girls softball, our dance team, our cheerleaders, the band, all these different community organizations that could utilize it that can't use it now or can use it very rarely. And so that's where we shifted that too. So we had a master plan at that point that could have been implemented for just baseball, softball. So there's been different plans that have been developed by administration. If the board were to say, we don't want to move forward with this contract today, just to be clear, then the board is saying that we're okay with not having turf next spring. Because in order to move this forward, then they have to be able to have a contract so that they can move forward to start getting workers in line for an August 1st shovels in the ground. And if the board were to say, we want a more comprehensive plan, we want this, we want that, then we just need to know what the board would like to do so we can do that for you.
So if we say no tonight, you're probably looking at 3 to 5 years before baseball is started.
I don't know that. I know for a fact that it's a year because it's not going to be next spring. Where you can't ask me the question of would I move baseball up and down or softball up and down, because I haven't even considered that as a possibility, because in my mind the board has acted. Well, in my personal opinion,
not in your
matter.
mind, we actually did act.
Correct. In action, the board acted. So therefore, for me to start theorizing would I have done something differently is really irrelevant because I like my job and.
Right. So then let's take up the question relative.
That's fair, right?
To board action. So let's take up the question relative.
They do
to
the same
board
thing
action for the
sometimes.
board. So administration is recommending, or they're putting forward a contract for $369,000. It's still the position of the board that the difference between $800,000 and the $369,000 remains earmarked to the baseball and softball complex for whatever it is that they believe they want and need.
I think we put 2 things away with the JV.
The JV,
Yeah.
yeah.
Plus we approved last week's turf for $575.
Yes.
And now we're basically just saying, so I guess in my mind is the delta between 800 and the two totals.
Right.
That is what could be earmarked for something else.
Not, could be earmarked for something else relative to baseball and softball exclusively.
I mean, that's what.
Well, that's my question, whether it's earmarked. That's
Well, it
my
could be-
question, is it
Could be up to
earmarked
baseball,
for
or the board could say, we've allocated to get turf and to get the JV field moved over there. You authorize that. I mean, we're bringing this forward to you to say this, in my mind, when we had this, I thought this was great news. We have a significant savings, which is great. The board can say, we allocated up to $800,000, but you don't get that $800,000. The rest of that money could be used to go into the phasing piece that could go with that.
Well, if we can do that, because that's not what our motion said at the 529 meeting. It says that we approve the recommendation to maintain the board's existing encumbrance of $800,000 for use at the baseball and softball facilities.
But I think we
I went up to, I think. Maybe we should have been more clear.
So I'm going off what Carrie is saying,
Right.
where she's in her mind thinking, I thought it was up to, and I'm saying, so there's options, there's two options you could say, it is $800,000, or it's up to $800,000. Administration is, we're not doing things that the board isn't aware of. We're bringing price points to you to approve before we move forward. You're going to know what that number is, which then it comes out of that $800,000.
If it had
Does that
been
make sense?
presented as up to 800,000, I would have voted for it. But just that it's just going to be 800,000, and that's why I opposed it. So, I mean, if we're going to modify what it is,
It's
maybe that
basically going to
discussion needs
be
to had.
800,000. I mean, or pretty close.
I thought it was.
I mean, we could say we don't know exactly, but if it's 275 or 300 to move the
I thought it was up to.
JV,
Maybe I missed.
it's around there. That plus this money, I mean, we're at 670,000 of the 800. So, I mean, I guess could we take that remaining money and put it back into
You could do the
something else?
fencing and
Sure.
issue at the football field.
Well, we could put it wherever it needs to be allocated. I guess I understood at the time that, yes, I voted for it, and it was to provide the turf as requested and to move the JV field over to John Long. And we had an estimate of how much that was going to cost, and it came to $800,000. We were very lucky, and now the estimate is much lower when it comes time to approve the contract. So therefore, I just assumed that money then, that's great, and it comes in lower. Wonderful, then the money can go to something else. But we said, yes, you can have that, and we're still providing the turf and the moving of the field. And maybe I misunderstood the motion. I thought it was up to 800, and maybe it came off as it is exactly 800, and if you save money if it comes in a lot cheaper. However, if it had come to 800 and 2,000, I don't think we would have, said, okay, well, here's your bill for 2,000. We would have had to find it out of a different budget.
It did come up at the last meeting that anything over that they would have to fundraise for. So I mean.
Right, if it was going to exceed it, that was the maximum we felt we could spend on this project.
And it'll be fairly close to the 800 anyway, which my bigger point is we have a finite amount of money, we have a certain amount of needs, the money should go to the most pressing needs, regardless of past decisions that maybe weren't made with full information. So,
I agree with that. That makes sense to me.
but for something that was, I'll just say, for something that was a 5-2 vote for, there doesn't seem to be a lot for this, to me.
Wait.
I was
For
against
what? What are you talking about?
For it. I mean, basically we had 5 people that were all for spending $800,000 for baseball, but I don't hear a lot about it. It seems
That was for turf and for moving
Sure.
the fields. That's what that was for.
the
But I
800
don't think we understood it was going to go, we thought it would be
For
that
turf
or
and
even, maybe even more. But now that it's coming under, it doesn't mean we're saying, well, now put dugouts in, put X, Y, and Z in, if that's what, if we have extra money. I think the only thing that we had talked about was moving it and turf. That's what I understood.
2 votes, 1 to move JV baseball field to John
Right.
Long, and 1 to allocate
Right.
800,000.
And I don't think anyone is disputing that, or maybe, as far as I'm concerned, I think we still have allocated funds to move the JV field over to the
Well,
jump.
yeah, part of the 800,000.
Right, it's part of the 800,000.
But I also think too, the 800,000, we may have thought it would go over that. So we were saying if it went over that, then there would have to be fundraising. That's my understanding.
Sure. And my feeling is over or under, not really relevant.
Right.
It's 800,000 should go to the most pressing need. And we didn't vote that way. But
Right, and we voted this way.
So is the question what we do with the difference between
Correct. That's
moving the
what-
field to...
Or are we just agreeing tonight to pay for the contract? And then the remaining money is not, at this point, officially committed?
Correct.
Or as far as-
We know as part of the as we continue to look at, as we continue to have that discussion last month about, and Scott was here from the point of beginning saying, you really know whether you have turf or not, you're going to need a practice football field. And there is no more green space for them. So if we continue to have JV at the high school campus, then that field is going to continue to get eaten up. We're going to continue to spend money trying to roll it, trying to make it safe for JV to play there. Football's going to come in and use it. JV's going to use it. There's really no rest for them. You know, Jim had youth camp today. You know, I mean, like if he had that field, he'd be using it. If he had turf, he'd be using it, but he'd probably have grass too. So there's, you know, that's always going to be used. So that was the idea. I think that was one of the ideas of saying, with JV going over there, it makes that area all available for green space, for football, for youth, for whatever it may be, becomes a green space. So we need JV to be moved in order for that to occur. If JV's there, if the baseball diamond is there, that impacts that long-term decision that was made in that way.
which I would assume we'll get that price at some point, like
Yes.
at the beginning of this.
Yes.
Because that's already been voted on. We're already moving forward with that.
In my mind, yes.
Yeah.
That wasn't seen as the urgency because we knew that even if we got a price point right now, they couldn't do the work this fall that would get it ready for the spring season because grass couldn't germinate. They couldn't have a field. So the priority was, okay, well, this is one thing that could get done for next spring. The money's there. Let's use our resources in the last month to work towards getting a solution to bring to the board for that. That allows us to bid out in the future, well in advance, to say, turning the field that's at John Long now into a JV field, what's the timeline for that to be ready for the next spring? Which then allows this surface to be utilized possibly for only this spring for the final time by baseball, which allows that to become a green space that football can utilize whenever they want.
I think those actions all make sense given the board's actions.
And Jerry, would you propose different board action?
Well, I mean, I voted against it last meeting, so I feel like yes, but has that ship sailed? But I don't think it's fair to keep going back and forth, which,
Well,
you know.
it seems to me like this contract, like I don't have a problem with this. It seems like it needs to happen, right? It's,
See, I just would argue
it's
it
way
doesn't-
under the 800. So my personal opinion would be great to say yes to this, but still, and committing the full 800. That's where I say no. Where we need the fencing at the football field and the entryway. I mean, I don't know what. I think that's a pretty high priority. I mean, there's a ton of other things I think that we could do with the remainder of that money. So I'd like to say yes to this, but then the remainder maybe go to the next highest priority. Those are my thoughts.
Which
doesn't
to me
necessarily
wouldn't
have
be football, though.
Decide that tonight, because we
Right.
don't know what the JV field is.
Right.
So at some point when we have costs like that, then certainly the board can look at that.
There is a domino effect, though, if you approve this
There's
tonight.
a huge domino effect.
But I don't-
If you step back from this thing, the domino effect started with the board's inability to make a decision relative to the movement of the fields or the placement of the fields prior to the development of a master plan. The master plan that was developed was for the high school only. It was not developed for the district-wide athletic facilities. It was developed for the high school complex only. And if priorities need to change when we consider the entirety of the master plan, which I believe we should, and whether we vote on this contract tonight or not, I would like administration to put together a master plan for the entirety of all of the district facilities that encompass the decisions that have been made to date.
Right, which to me, Paul, to clarify, and you correct me if I'm wrong, would be the master plan we approved for this campus.
Yes.
Right, in April.
Yes.
Plus this baseball, softball.
Yes.
And it's simply, to me, it's as simple as asking administration to plug where that gets plugged in.
Well, but it's not, because at the last meeting, there was discussion about, well, what do we do with the pitch of the high school field, the current high school field? What about the fencing? Is the fencing up to date? All the things that we say now, well, if they're not covered in the 800,000, they'll need to be fundraised for. Well, what are those things? We know what they are at the high school facility, right? We've got this document that tells us what those things are.
Right. The missing piece is really the JV field.
Well, the JV field and any improvements that the high school,
Right.
are the varsity coaches saying they want no improvements to the existing fields, other than turf?
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you, Paul. On July 23rd, 2018, we gave the board a master athletic facility plan that included baseball and softball at John Long, and it included turf at the high school. I'm looking at it right now. $1.3 million, recommended master plan high school campus. It showed 2 football fields on the current JV site. It gave all those pieces, and the board directed me to go back and meet with a group that hadn't met with us yet to develop more information, and we brought that back to the board, and the board decided to not again act. So we've given an athletic master plan that was encompassing all those pieces with cost estimates that went with that.
But it's not prioritized, Jeff, because it's
But
not.
the board,
It's not.
but the board never asked for that, and this is back
No,
in
I
July
get it.
23rd, 2018. We're now in June 24th, 2019.
I agree the board hasn't asked for that. But to Jerry's point, just because we haven't asked for it since then, doesn't mean we should make another bad decision by not asking for it now. I mean, we didn't. And I will tell you the reason, at least my belief is that we didn't ask for it then, is because there was this belief that this $800,000 was earmarked. It was earmarked for baseball and softball, not up to $800,000. I mean, the plain words of the resolution that was approved last meeting. We say up to $800,000. It was $800,000 being allocated for these sports. And I'm just saying, let's get it right. I would prefer that we get it right. Now, I think there's another piece on this. We did meet with the Little League a year and a half ago, and Little League said, well, the only way that they continue to use the fields that we have out there is if there's turf on these fields. Without turf on these fields, their schedule falls into question. So there's an additional reason why turf becomes important on these fields as soon as possible. Weather and our commitment to the community.
And going back to that July 23rd meeting, I have in my notes that I made the motion to approve the athletic field master plan, which failed, so we did decide not to move ahead with that. So,
But Jared, that master plan was only for softball and baseball.
No, that was...
because we had the 2
No, 'cause they
football
have, like,
fields on
long
there.
range.
was what we ended up ultimately approving, because administration came back with the exact same thing.
Pretty much true. That's pretty much true. But we did reflect, but we did come back with the exact same thing. You're right. We did.
But as it relates to this rendering, as it relates to this master plan, the master plan from point of beginning, and the phasing and the priority, none of that was even contemplated at that point in time.
Right, it was going to be, because...
Right, there was no priority given to the stadium fencing, and there was no priority given to the magnitude of the total cost of the project at the high school.
Right, it was just a plan, though.
Right, it was a plan.
With dollars attached to it.
Yeah.
With dollars attached for what?
$1.3 million for all those pieces that we've talked about.
And those pieces are what?
Would you like me to bring it up? Would you like me to have Kara bring it up on the thing?
Yes, please.
Let me email it to her.
I know.
You're talking the July
20th.
And there must be, I can't find an updated one as we're having the discussion, but so there must be another one because I have a slide and it says add what $800,000 includes, but it has all the numbers on there. Oh yeah, you can probably look for it.
Yeah, what was the meeting
Right,
date?
July 23rd, 2018.
Thank you.
Good.
This one?
Good. So if you can scroll out, probably just a little, yeah, that's good. So you can see it shows master plan number 1, which shows the two varsity fields being at the high school. Keep going. Master plan number 1, the cost was $975,000, $1.2 million with turf. So we're well over the $800,000 budget. We then looked at what if we were to do this at John Long Middle School. The varsity baseball was $335, varsity softball would be $195, JV baseball would be $270, which put us at $800,000, which was on budget. Which is why we have $375. Go back up here, please. $335 and $195 coming in at $369. Was a pleasant surprise because this is of 18. So keep going. So then it shows a little more, and we look more deeper at what that would look like. We even have the new tennis courts that were there. And it shows a recommended master plan at the high school campus that would showcase the discussion of having JV baseball moved up. They're not keeping that as a baseball field, so you could have the equivalency of 2 football fields. Doesn't mean you would. You could run one. You could run 2 north and south. You could run 1 north and south. You could have 2 half fields, east and west, whatever you would want. And then the next slide shows the $1.3 million that encompasses that. It encompasses moving the different field events. The recommendation that we've moved forward with point of beginning is different than one that Rattler came forward with, but it's a similar point, and we're at $1.3 million. And I think and it shows just the diameter of that piece that went with it. You have a cost estimate of what that would look like: high school stadium, high school campus site features, West Field, softball baseball complex, site features that eventually we would think we would need. So you're asking, well, so point of beginning come up with different numbers, but if you were to renovate the concession stand, restrooms, equipment shed, looked like at that point we were at $400,000. We've since then, the high school West Field, the 2 practice fields, with the referendum occurring and having that excess dirt, we actually used some of our own money to have Spielvogel do it then at a significant savings to be able to do that, knowing that we needed the green space anyways, and it was going to be no matter what decision was made regarding athletic facilities, having more green space was only going to make our high school campus a better campus that went with that. So you can even see a lot of those options that are way down the priority list: stadium lighting, scoreboard, things like that we had listed back in July. And then I think that was it. I think then I went down. Then you sort of get an overview.
Right.
Sorry, Kevin.
And since then, this now has been bifurcated into 2 different plans, right? By virtue of board action.
That's correct.
And 2 different sets of priority. Again, from your perspective, by virtue of board action. One priority that was absolute based upon a commitment made 3 years ago, and the second, a new phase priority based upon a newly developed plan. So is the board in agreement that is the direction that we need to continue to head? It's the action that we've taken to this point.
Right, correct.
By nod ahead, I'll look for consensus.
Yeah. It didn't go in the direction I wanted it to, but I'll get on board. Yeah. Well, we should do something.
I agree. Okay, so by consensus, I'm seeing nod of head. I don't know which direction Jerry's moving the other direction. But based
I'm in the
based
direction
upon-
of spending the money on the most pressing needs.
Yeah, okay. But based upon the action that's been taken so far and the consensus that appears to be there relative to maintaining that action, then let's move to the next issue relative to what we did and did not, or may not have agreed to relative to the last meeting, which is we've got a contract before us for $369,000 for a turf. The other element of the master plan that was presented on July 23rd, and subsequently approved just last meeting, which mirrors this, or approximates this plan. It moves the baseball fields over there, but the two conditions, the two elements, the turf on the fields and moving the JV baseball field. We have a proposal for getting turf on the field. We have assurances from the administration that putting the turf on the field is going to take into consideration, and this quote takes into consideration all the things that come up to it, right?
Yes, and there can be, again, they could do soil investigations, the engineering piece in there for $45,000 will uncover any other issues there might be. So that,
But the proposal will be, we got turf on the field and it's ready to play. That's what this contract is.
Yes.
So all of the things that butt up against it are, because that was a concern that was raised by Scott. Make sure you take care of those things, and we're confident that this contract does those things. Right? Okay. And then we will await a proposal for moving the JV field.
Yes, and we can work on getting that, as I said, in the last month, because that wasn't something that could be accomplished anyways. It wasn't a priority of us using our energy in that way, but we can move that to a priority
And
list.
that those are the two elements, and only two elements, that would go against this $800,000. And that any remainder would be what?
Well, and to be clear, if it's 300,000, we're saying that's 85-ish% of the 800,000 anyway. Because there's been a lot of, well, we can put it towards this or that. Well, most of it's going to be gone when we move the JV field. So just for a statement of fact, unless that moving the JV field came in way over or way under, it's going to be about 700 of the 800,000 for that project. For this, plus we said 275, and if we said inflate it to 300, that's 675 of the 800, whatever.
But I'm not sure I would agree with that, Jerry, because the point of the beginning said 575 for turf, and that came in at 369.
Sure, but
so why wouldn't we
just basing it on the three? Of course we have to get it.
Right. Why wouldn't we expect? Is it unreasonable to expect that the 275 might come in at a number equally as low as the turf did?
No, it's not, but I'm just basing it on what we have for now. So when we talk about, well, we can put it towards other needs, it comes in around there. There's not a lot to put towards other needs. Not right, wrong, or otherwise, just, it's not like, hey, we can fund the entrance. We'd have $100,000 for the entrance in that scenario.
Well, whatever that 100,000 might be.
Sure.
Whether it's 125, 100, whatever would be left over is not committed at this time to any one specific project.
That's correct.
Well, it is, we just have to undo that, right? We committed it last month.
Well, I think it is. If you read the minutes, you would say that it's committed.
We committed it last month, but I don't think that's to say we couldn't uncommit it this month.
Right.
So let's do that then.
Since I think I made the motion, I would make a motion then that, I don't know how to word it, that yes, we would.
Well, let me ask, so is there somebody that wants to make a motion to approve the contract as presented? Are there any questions on the contract, any additional questions on the contract?
What is their warranty on the turf and their work? Is there anything close to that?
I can tell you that the typical life expectancy is 12 to 15 years. I don't have the specifics of the warranty per se.
That's something you guys get.
Oh, that would
Be a pretty easy conversation, I think, to have, right?
Any additional questions? So somebody willing to make a motion to approve the contract as presented?
I will make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
So this is just regarding the contract, so I mean, I guess this, not discussing the balance. We just want to talk the contract here.
I wanted to talk the contract here so that we can get that on the record, that is an element that is moving towards, and I'll explain why in just a moment. But, okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the contract for softball, turf baseball, and softball in fields at John Long Middle School, aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
The motion passes. Now, as it relates to the nature and extent of the projects that are associated with the $800,000, Carrie, you made the motion last month that said $800,000 is earmarked to baseball and softball.
I do. Can I amend that motion at this? I mean, we already voted on it, but that my misunderstanding that at the time the project was estimated to cost at least $800,000. At this time, since with new information, the project has come in with less than that amount, that at this time we approve only the contract and what, at this time, just approving the contract with the understanding we will approve with John Long Middle School moving the baseball field there when an estimate is able to come in on that work. But that money would be the only money that the board at this time has committed to for baseball and softball. At the time of last month, we believed that those two projects, both the turf and moving the field, was going to be at least $800,000, that's what the motion was made. Now with new information, we still continue, we will fund the field, turf and moving the field, but no more at this time.
Isn't that just what we're going to vote on at the next meeting, potentially, or at some future meeting when there's, administration brings a proposal and says it's $300,000 to move the field? We're already spending some of it.
Yeah,
And then if nothing else comes to us to spend the extra 120, there's nothing to approve then.
But would it come to us, or would...
Well, then we're like preemptively voting to not vote for something? Is that what
Well,
we're
I think you
doing?
have to adjust what we've already voted on. We already voted that all 800 can go towards that. So
Right.
this is at least saying
And
that
now
there's
we
a-
just voted that 369 of that is already gone. We're just essentially voting on the JV field.
now, I guess, Jerry, what we'd be doing, what we'd be doing is affirmatively stating the board's position relative to availability of funds for baseball and softball to be limited to this contract and a contract to move the JV field from the high school complex to the middle school. And just so there's no misunderstanding, that it does two things. One, I believe it allows administration to look at the requirements for the other priorities.
Right.
And it allows people to understand what the board's commitment are relative to those projects.
The second part I agree with. The first part I feel like once that JV field's moved, we're back to just that priority list, which is already listed in the administration's preferred order. There's really nothing else to, the other ones are done. So then we would say, give us a, if that was just done.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't.
We just approved spending the money on turf. At some point, we'll get a price for something we already voted to do, unless it comes in or we change our mind to move the JV field. Then all that's left is that athletic master plan that was just for up here, because everything else would have been done. Unless something else comes up, and that is prioritized. At least I took it as phase 1, 2, 3, 4 was priorities.
It is prioritized, but it's uncertain as to your point a long time ago, and I apologize for how long this has taken, the availability of funds and what district funds might be available to fund these priorities.
Right.
And I see this as a way to continue to honor the commitment that was made, but in a much more specific fashion, where the projects relative to those commitments are only for turfing on the baseball field, baseball and softball field, and moving the JV field.
But I think it still makes sense for point of, because I don't think point of beginning has gone too much further than just the turf at this point. I think we owe it to ourselves to have point of beginning give us some feedback. If there's something else that makes sense to do it now, because once the turf's in, it's going to cost us 3 times, or if there's just some other natural progression. So I don't think we've had that conversation yet to know all of that is what would be on that additional list, because I think just putting in the turf doesn't solve that complex. And there will be other items, and I don't know if that's in our 20-year plan or not, but there'll be other items that'll be at that field that have to be addressed.
But they'll be funded, as we've said all along, through public-private partnership.
Right, and so, yeah, and that's what I'm saying, even, the cost estimate that we shared back in 2018 had some of those extra pieces included in there that I'm assuming probably still, reside as being a necessity. No one's upgraded the concession stand, or restrooms, equipment shed, none of those pieces that have gone with it. And all of those phasings are relative to if someone were to come forward and say, I'll give money to this phase or to this project, and that funds that project or funds that phase, then I guess they could be competing, in all honesty.
Yeah, but we're not going to do phase 4 before we do phase 2. I mean, I think that was good work. So,
But wouldn't it be reasonable to put those elements in this overall master plan?
If yes.
And with an appropriate phase associated?
but
Yes?
yeah, but that would also almost, to me, be like putting soccer in there at this point. We already voted on it. They got the bid for it. We just approved it to spend $369 of the $800.
Baseball. Yeah, soccer's already done. You mean baseball?
Right.
You mean baseball's
to me,
done.
baseball's done.
Oh, right.
Too. Right. We'll put it in there.
No,
but-
baseball's not done.
Well,
From what I
it's
hear
half
Steve
done.
say.
I mean, I'm sure we're going to have more discussion about it, but the master plan. This master plan was essentially not. We didn't move forward on it because of concerns about Little League and JV field moving. I'm sure it's going to come up at the next meeting again, is my guess.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to avoid it coming up at meeting after meeting, and to provide administration with direction to say, okay, these are the commitments that the board's willing to make relative to these elements, and whatever we're not willing to make relative to these elements, somebody has to go out and develop a plan for, and get that into the master plan, and then, because the rest of it is going to be funded through public-private, a partnership of sorts. I don't want it to keep coming back up at meetings. So I can go either way at this point. Jerry's right. I mean, we voted to adopt this contract. Administration can present a contract for movement of that field, at which point we can say, this is it, or we can amend, or we can put forward a new motion to affirmatively state that the extent of the board's commitment relative to baseball and softball is limited, further limited by a contract or a proposal to move the JV field. So I'll ask the board what their pleasure might be.
I mean, I think everyone knows my opinion, but, it's up to the board. It's not just what, I want.
It'd be helpful for administration to know, does the board want me to bring back the most cost-effective solution to get JV baseball field over there, or do they want me to stay within the confines of $800,000?
Most cost-effective. We voted to get it. Let's just get it and move on.
The most cost-effective solution.
Okay. That's what I need to hear.
I mean, we can go nuts with the $120,000 towards football at that point.
Yeah, I don't know what the number will be. I'm just saying,
Ish.
it's just like anything. If you, I mean, my wife says I have $200 to spend, I go spend $200, right? I mean, that's sort of how it works. I buy a nicer, whatever, golf club. Maybe that's not a good example. Different example, whatever it might be. So it's helpful to hear you'd want us to come back with meeting the essentials of what we're looking for. Obviously, we want it to be safe. We want it to meet the standards that would make it playable for our students, great experience for our fans, all those pieces. But that's what we want the focus to be on that. Okay.
Any
That's
further
all.
discussion? Okay, then we'll move on to new board policy manual.
Yes, in May of 2018, another topic that we've had a lot of discussion about and had a lot of meetings on as we tried to make sure our board policies align to both current practice as well as to state and federal and local mandates that we should have. I remember bringing Neola and another company in to make a presentation to the board. The board selected Neola to review and develop board policy. Administration then met monthly with Neola from October of 2018 to February of 2019 to develop that. Then the policy committee, and a number of you that weren't even on the policy committee, but with Steve, Carrie, and Joe serving on it every time, and then those of you that were there the majority of the time, November 18th, January 14th, February 11th, March 11th, April 1st, and May 13th. We had the readings of all those policies. And then we had a full board, had a first reading of the new policy manual at the May 29th meeting, and now we will have a second reading and approval at this meeting. They were all posted on the website. There was some that we'd asked for clarification on. We've updated the board on those, whether it was the class rank, there was a couple policies that we had questions on, that we resolved those and now are in there. And so we were asking for a recommendation that the board complete the second reading of the new Neola policy manual and resolve and approve the following resolution. And I'll let that be read by somebody if you would be kind enough to do that.
So with that as the backdrop, prior to entertaining any questions, I've asked for a motion that resolves that the bylaws and policies printed and codified of the comprehensive document entitled Bylaws and Policies of the Grafton Board of Education are hereby adopted, and that all bylaws and policies heretofore adopted by the Grafton Board of Education are hereby rescinded. Further be it resolved that in the event any policy, part of a policy or section of the bylaws is judged to be inconsistent with law, inoperative by a court of competent jurisdiction, or is invalidated by a policy or a contract duly adopted by this board, the remaining bylaws, policies, and parts of policies shall remain in full effect. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Second. Is there any further discussion regarding the new policies that have been part of diligent work by the policy committee, a first read by the board, and now a second read by the board? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And it passes. Thank you, Jeff. Gift reports.
Yes, so we have 3 different gift reports this evening. We have one from the Grafton's Lions Club, donating $500. It's a restricted gift for the high school FBLA. If you recall, I think it was last month we talked about them qualifying to go to nationals in San Antonio this summer. And so the Lions have supported our students. I believe it was like $5,000 total, Mr. Manti. It was about the cost or something like that, approximate. So they have donated $500 for FBLA nationals, as well as the Cedarburg Grafton Rotary has also donated $500 to our Grafton High School FBLA to be able to help them raise costs and cover the costs for them and their families as they move forward. And then our final gift is for baseball from Karen and Nathan Schmidt that made a donation of $300 for a restricted gift for baseball.
Do I have a motion to accept these gifts as presented? Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, aye. Aye. Opposed? And it passes with many thanks to the donors as listed.
Yep, and we will send a letter on behalf of the district thanking them for their support of our students, and as well as the over $60,000 that the GEF also reported out tonight. So it's a giving season for our students which is great this summer.
And the construction report.
So we have a construction report, and Jamie is not here tonight, so Topher is serving in his leave. We have so we have a number of projects that are ongoing both in the district. As you walk around, you'll see that at the high school, whether it's ceiling tiles or carpet going in classrooms or painting, as well as some exterior things and things happening at our other buildings that you may or may not see. Now that we're getting some of the things that Topher will update us on, we're trying to pull together our budget and be able to give a budget update at the July board meeting that will tease out where we are with all of our projects and some of the things that still need to be accomplished. But as those pay bills start coming in, we'll be able to organize that and be able to share that at that July board meeting as well. So a lot of things still happening, though, in the next couple weeks.
Yes, and it's my intention not to replace Jamie, just to fill in. So the curbing is complete out in our parking lot, so all the curbing, the sidewalks are installed. Paving, with regard to paving, the prep work begins tomorrow, and they expect to be laying the base course on Friday, and then the top coat Saturday, and then Monday. Striping would then follow that. They would be looking at, or expecting the lots to be cordoned off and closed through the 4th of July weekend.
So the ones down here by district office, so from as you leave the Circle Drive, as you come down here, from there all the way to tennis courts will be closed from starting tomorrow until July 4th. So everyone will be parking at the high school and walking down to district office.
Then we have Spielvogel is scheduled to come in on Wednesday to lay topsoil and grade those areas with the idea that then landscaping with the seeding of those open spaces would begin sometime in mid-July. Again, all these things are weather dependent. Following Spielvogel's laying of the topsoil and grading here, they would move over and take care of Kennedy. As I look over and see Dr. Gunderson expectantly waiting. So moving on from the exterior into the interior, all the high school classrooms are carpeted, so if you were to walk around and the doors were open, you would see all the classrooms currently carpeted. All ceiling tiles are complete in the classrooms, and first floor classrooms are being painted. So every day when you walk around here, the rooms are getting to look better and better. Scott and I have talked many times. It is exciting to walk into rooms that you used to walk in and see the old ceramic tile and walls that weren't that great and older ceiling tiles. You walk in and they look like new rooms again, with new carpeting, painted rooms, ceiling tiles. The high school hallways are planned to begin after the abatement of stairways. We're abating the stairways starting tomorrow. Following that, then we'll be carpeting the hallways here at the high school. Moving over to John Long Middle School, windows are being replaced as they have the opportunity. Those should be all replaced and complete by the end of summer. And looking at Woodview, we are imminently expecting that Woodview classrooms would receive carpeting. There's 8 classrooms, 4 along the southern portion, kind of the south facing on the east side. And then the classrooms that used to have doors going into the library, those 4 classrooms would also be receiving carpeting. And then at Kennedy, same thing with Kennedy with carpeting, it's imminent. The classrooms in the B wing, and if you're not familiar with this sort of new A, B, and C wing concept, the B wing would be if you were to walk in by the front office and take a left down the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade hallway, that's the B wing. Those classrooms are going to have the carpeting replaced, and then we'll have hallway carpeting in there as well. So those are some of the many projects going on currently.
Any questions? All right, then we'll move to adjournment. The Board of Education will convene in closed session to consider employee compensation. 2, discuss certain proposed contract modifications relating to the contract with Hoffman Planning, Design, and Construction, Inc. for design and construction services on the district's referendum project. This is in accordance with Wisconsin State Statutes 19851 C.E. motion to close session?
Second.
John, how do you vote?
Yes.
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 Yes. We're in closed. Thank you.